Are you in love with your car, but not your car payment? Refinance your auto loan with Florida Central Credit Union, and you could reduce to 2.5 annual percentage rate. Plus, you'll receive $250 cash and no payments for up to 90 days, all while reducing your monthly car payment. Visit floridacentralcu.com to get started. Florida Central Credit Union, the credit union you can bank on for great auto loan rates. Rates subject to change. Restrictions apply. Insured by NCUA.
When your celebration of life is prepaid in advance, it becomes a gift from you to your family later, because no one should have to plan for a loss while they're experiencing one. Paying in advance protects your loved ones and gives you the peace of mind you deserve. Let us help you plan every detail with professionalism and compassion. We're your local Dignity Memorial provider. Find us at dignitymemorial.com.
Forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. And this show is brought to you by pscocoa.com. That's Phoebe Sod's cocoa website, her chocolate website. She's an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. And they used to be called Dove Chocolate Discoveries. Everybody knows Dove chocolates, man. Their favorite chocolates out there. But now they're called the Cocoa Exchange. And they make the finest, silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, everybody knows that, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscocoa.com, pscocoa.com. That is Phoebe Sod's website. She's the one sponsoring the show. You can go there, click on the Shop Now button, and you can look through all the great products they have there. They have taster sampler packages you can get. Or if you want to get into the cocoa business, you want to become a chocolatier like Phoebe Sod, you have another friend, you can become 3 chocolatiers. And you can contact Phoebe Sod there at the website and get into the chocolate business and have those little chocolate parties, like Tupperware parties like they used to have. You know, everybody loves it when I say the women cackling there at that chocolate party. But okay, so I'll say it again. The women cackling at that chocolate party. Okay. Also, to a little announcement here. American Freedom Radio is our host station here on Saturday nights, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And they're trying to raise money for equipment refurbishing and stuff like that they need. So if you go to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, they have a donate button. You can go there and donate to the cause. Most of the hosts on here, they don't have any sponsors like pscocoa.com. So, you know, this is what keeps the station going. The station doesn't charge their host to produce. Some stations charge the host. You got to pay to get on. But good old Danny Romero has been in this radio biz for a long, long time. And he's doing it just out of the goodness of his heart. So they need to raise some funds over there at AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Okay. Really excited about today's show. Our guest's name is Daniel Simone. And his website is danielsimone.net. Fascinating guy. I was reading his bio. Long, I was going to say checkered career, but a long, varied career. A lot of different businesses, a lot of different activities in his life. But he's written 2 books. The one that just came out, just hot off the press, is May 9th. The Pierre Hotel Affair. How 8 gentlemen thieves plundered $28 million, the largest jewel heist in history. And that was like in 1973 or something crazy like that. So this would be like $280 million in today's kind of money. The Pierre Hotel Affair. He co-wrote that with one of the robbers. One of the guys who did the job back in the 70s was Nick the Cat Sacco. And Daniel Simone wrote the book with him, the Pierre Hotel Affair, where hopefully we're going to have time, too. We're going to talk about the Lufthansa heist. Now, get this. Our guest, Daniel Simone, co-wrote a book with Henry Hill from the Goodfellas movie. You can imagine if you heard him on Howard Stern, or even our friend Vito Colucci interviewed him a couple of times. My God, dealing with that guy, you deserve a reward. So danielsimone.net. Also, we're going to talk about some other things. Daniel Simone has a documentary series based on Charles Manson project that he has coming out. and there is he has a book launch party in Manhattan. Let's see this here. It is on Tuesday, May 23rd from 6:30 to 8:30, and the store is located. It's the Mysterious Bookshop, and it's at 58 Warren Street in Manhattan, and that's again at May 23rd from 6:30 to 8:30. Daniel Simone, are you there?
Yes, I am, and thanks for having me, Ed.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about this show. Why don't you tell the audience about yourself? Who is Daniel Simone?
Well, Daniel Simone is an author who specializes in writing about sensational crimes. Typically, I recruit the collaboration of either one of the original perpetrators of the crime or one of the lead investigators. And I write in a unique style called the narrative nonfiction genre, which in short is writing a true story, but in the style of a novel. So it reads as if it's a novelized story.
Very interesting. And where do you live now? In New York?
Palm Beach, Florida.
Palm Beach, Florida. Very nice. And you're heading up to New York for this, it's like a book signing or a book launching party. What is this?
Yes, my publisher, Pegasus, is sponsoring and hosting a book launch party on Tuesday evening, as you pointed out a few seconds ago, at a very boutique-ish bookshop called the Mysterious Bookshop. That's actually a bookstore, and it's located in the Tribeca district of Manhattan. And some colorful personalities are expected to attend, some celebrities, and it should be an amusing evening.
Oh, very nice. And what about Nick Sacco? Will he be there signing books?
Nick Sacco is currently still in the Federal Witness Protection Program for an unrelated matter, nothing at all to do with the Pierre robbery. And compounded with the fact that he's an elderly gentleman with certain physical ailments, he declined to attend in person, but he will be calling in, and he will be fielding questions from the guests who will be at the launch. So that also will add intrigue to the affair.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Maybe he can sneak in disguise or something like that, right? Like Henry Hill used to do. Let me ask you this, though.
Maybe he will.
Now, let me ask you this, though. When you're going to do one of these books and you want to get a hold of someone like Nick Sacco or Henry Hill, who's in the Witness Protection Program, how do you locate them and get a hold of them?
Well, typically, usually reach out to an author whom they target to collaborate with. In the case of Nick Sacco, he contacted my agent seeking a writer to write about the Pierre Hotel robbery, and my agent decided to refer him to me, and we introduced ourselves. He told me about himself. I certainly knew about the robbery because it was a sensational spin in the media on a daily basis for 6 months after it. So I was intimately familiar with, and I recalled it vividly, reading about it when it occurred, which was in 1972. And we struck a deal, and we immediately got to work, and this is the final product.
And what about with Henry Hill? I'm sorry.
Henry Hill was a different situation. Henry Hill, I sought him. When the Lufthansa robbery took place, I lived in the vicinities of Kennedy Airport, and again, it was sensationalized in the media, and it was so fascinating. And at the same time, coincidentally, I was into a relationship with a Lufthansa stewardess. Okay. So that coincidence brought me closer to the topic. And I vowed that someday I would eventually get to write a book about it. And in 2010, I was at a fundraising event, and coincidentally, Henry Hill was also at that same fundraising party. I introduced myself to him, and I proposed the project, and we struck a deal right there and then.
He took it on. He took it on right away. He went for it.
we shook hands and we formalized an agreement amongst our respective attorneys later. But he and I had an understanding within a minute from the time that I had proposed it to him.
Fascinating. Now, was it difficult working with him because he had a lot of drug problems and alcohol problems, all kind of situations?
Well, all I could say is that Henry was a trip to work with. He would frequently be inebriated. He would diverge from the topic and he tried to engage me in conversations unrelated to the project. He loved cooking, and he would share cooking recipes with me. But quite often I would find him intoxicated. So I decided, I said, you know what, Henry, let's do this. Let's have our daily discussions early in the morning. Is that okay with you? He said, oh, yeah, sure. I'm up early. Call me 7:30 in the morning. So I did. But that didn't really help the situation because even at 7:30 in the morning, Henry was already half slosh.
Ah, that's a shame.
So, but it was fun. It was fun. He was giddy. He was witty, always quick with a joke or a witty remark. But in the end, I got to know him very well. We became fond of one another, and the project turned out, I'm being told, quite successful.
Let me ask you a quick question. Now, your audio seems to be fading in and out just a little bit. Are you on a speakerphone?
No, I'm not. I'm not in my office. This is an alternate number, which is a cell phone.
Okay, it's good enough. It's good enough. Just every now and then, just a little bit of fading in and out. Now, during the time, did you have to deal with Henry in person, or you called him up on the phone?
No, we spent time together. He spent time at my home during the summer of 2011, and we met on numerous occasions in person, and we interacted. We even socialized on several occasions. And Henry was very quick to accept a social invitation because he loved to do anything but talk about the project. To him, I guess he did it so frequently, repeatedly, on so many interviews, that it sort of became not only redundant, but sort of a chore to him. Yeah. So he was easily distracted, sort of, speaking.
Now, I've heard also, too, that even right up until his death, he was still working for the cops. He was still working undercover, making cases and getting paid as an informant, like setting up drug dealers and setting up even friends of his and stuff. Did you experience any of that?
No, not at all. And to the best of my knowledge, those are only empty rumors.
Okay.
I have no confirmation or no evidence that, in fact, he was still working undercover. Not to mention the fact that he wasn't well in his later years. He suffered from a case of diabetes. And the fact of the matter is that many years ago, the federal marshals expelled him from the witness protection program because he just was not abiding by the rules, and even more infuriating to the marshals, after they would relocate Henry and going through the expense and the efforts to nestle him somewhere where he would be safe, him and his family, Henry would introduce himself to his new neighbors. He would host a barbecue party, and after a couple of beers, he would reveal his true identity to his neighbors, and now at that point, the marshals would be compelled to relocate him. And after doing this 3 times, they finally said, you know what, Henry, you're on your own. And they expelled him.
Now, wasn't there an incident, too, or were you involved with him at the time where there was an incident out in the woods, or he was out in the woods and he was like molested or raped or something like that, and they filmed it? Are you aware of that?
No. I'm not aware of it, and again, that could also be a vague rumor.
Could be. Okay, I think I heard him admit that on either on Howard Stern or perhaps one of the other interviews or something like that. But I could be wrong. I'm getting old. I'm get up here in years myself. I'm not as bad as Henry yet, but I'm out there. Okay, but now, also too, what's going on with Charles Manson? What do you have going on with that?
Well, Charles Manson collaborated with myself and my partner on this project in developing and writing a manuscript about what really happened during the Sharon Tate and the Lino and Rosemarie LaBianca murders of 1969. What really happened during the trial? What were Manson's true and actual involvements, if any, in those murders that were blasted all over the world by the media? So it's a revelatory project. It's contradictory in nature, and it's the very first Manson book that he himself corroborated and endorsed. And just not as a recent, the Reels channel, which is a Canadian broadcasting company that also broadcasts nationally in the United States, began producing a documentary series that is based on my manuscript. And I've been featured in the series myself, and the episodes will be broadcast on or about December of 2017. And it should be quite explosive and very, very interesting and informative and contradictory.
Okay, great. That's great. That's like perfect time. I'll have you back like around October, November, and we'll do a whole show about that. Oh, I'd love to get you on here about the Manson. How'd you get a hold of Manson? You just wrote to him in prison?
No. My partner in this project, her name is Heidi Jordan Lee. She began researching the entire Manson saga 7 or 8 years ago, and she spent a great deal of efforts and time not only researching the entire case, but also discovering and unearthing documents to support our new contentions. And she contacted me and proposed for her and I to develop this project as a joint venture, and I decided to take on the task of doing it. And of course, we have many hours of recorded conversations with Charles Manson. We communicated on a daily basis, and we ultimately arrived at the end of the project. The manuscript is completed. And as I mentioned, the Reels channel is currently producing the documentary series, which I'm being told they're just about at the completion of the project. And hopefully the book will be published on or about the spring of 2018.
Okay. Oh, boy, great. And did you actually meet with him in the prison, or was this over the phone?
My partner did. Heidi Jordan Lee did. So I never met him in person. We just conversed by telephone and by mail. But no, I did not actually meet him in person.
So real quick, before we get to the book here, the one you came on to talk about, the Pierre Hotel affair, how 8 gentlemen thieves plundered $28 million in the largest jewel heist in history. Your impression of Charles Manson, is he totally out of his mind, or what do you think?
Well, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I certainly am not qualified to certify him whether he's out of his mind or not.
Okay.
But based on my encounters with him, my personal encounters with him, at times he's very coherent, quite cogent. And at times he can ramble on irrelevantly and endlessly. At times he can be very, very philosophical, sensible, at times charming, affable, and at times when he doesn't feel like really conversing, he could be an altogether different person. So again, without qualifying myself, my opinion, my layman's opinion is that he's probably schizophrenic. I'm sure that he must have sociopathic tendencies because, in fact, he was a criminal. Yeah. He was an incorrigible criminal, but it's important to note that he has a record of approximately 38 arrests, and without exception, none of those arrests and crimes were related to violence. So that's an important fact to note. So, and that's really who the real Charles Manson is: a petty thief, a promoter of prostitution, a car thief, a con man, a fraud, but did he have any direct or indirect involvement in the murders of Sharon Tate and her friends? Did he manipulate the killers or did he induce the killers in committing those murders? There's no evidence of that. There is no credible, irrefutable, conclusive evidence that it would establish, as a matter of law, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Charles Manson had any direct or indirect involvements with those murders. These are the findings that we have in hand, and we have documentation that supports those findings. In fact, if one were to take the painstaking time to read the 6,600 pages of the trial transcripts, even a layperson, not necessarily an attorney, even an ordinary average layperson would walk away concluding that there's no evidence here, that as a juror, you would have concluded that Charles Manson was in fact guilty.
We definitely have to have you back on that. This is fascinating stuff. Real quick, one last question about Manson, then we'll get into the book, the Pierre Hotel book. Is that did you get anything about? Because he spent some time at Boys Town, that boys' home. I think I forget what state it was in at the moment, but there was a lot of child molestation going on there. Did he talk to you about his experience at Boys Town at all?
Yes, he did. He has very bad experiences and lingering memories of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and if he was already emotionally scarred by then, his time that he did spend in that institution exacerbated his mental anguish. And
for smarter money decisions, LendingTree can help. With the LendingTree app, you can track your finances, compare loan rates, and find ways to cut monthly bills. Download the free LendingTree app and start keeping more of your money. Terms and conditions may apply. NMLS number 1136.
If you've never played a game that's so much fun it's impossible to put down, then you've never played Best Fiends. Best Fiends is the best Match 3 style mobile puzzle game out there. It's basically an action-packed adventure and a brain-boosting puzzle game all rolled into one. Most of the Match 3 games on the market are just the same old format with different colors. And maybe cookies instead of candies. But Best Fiends is different. You play through an actual storyline, complete with adorable collectible characters called Fiends. As you get further along in the game, you'll watch your Fiends grow from wee baby versions of themselves into full-grown characters. The more you play, the more powerful and helpful your Fiends become. So if you're tired of crushing the same old candy, give Best Fiends a try. Download Best Fiends free today on the App Store or Google Play.
Play Best Fiends. Download free.
Evidently, in my opinion, based on what he's told me, he's remained scarred, emotionally scarred.
Fascinating. Do you get into his experience with the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson and any of that stuff?
Oh, yes. That's a whole different episode.
Okay.
Yes. He was good friends with Dennis Wilson. Dennis Wilson, for the benefit of the listeners, was the founder and drummer of the Beach Boys, the famed American rock and roll band of the 60s and 70s. And he was also... Charles Manson had also befriended a personality who was very, very prominent and successful in the music industry. His name was Terry Melcher.
Right.
He was a highly successful and respected, esteemed music promoter, and he was also the only son of the American actress Doris Day.
That's right.
Terry Melcher died of, I believe, I may or may not be 100% correct on this, but he died of cancer about 20 years ago. And he was also engaged to the famous actress Candice Bergen. So Charles Manson flocked with celebrities. He ran with many Hollywood types, some actors and actresses of status. Steve McQueen, for example, Warren Beatty, and many, many others. So he was charming, he was endearing, and he knew how to get under somebody's skin.
Fascinating stuff. Did anything come up in your research about the Process Church of the Final Judgment, a satanic cult out of New York, and also based out of England?
Nothing conclusive. Nothing that would establish Manson's involvement in those institutions. No, and we really didn't focus on it. We discussed the allegations and rumors that Manson was involved in Scientology, and but there's really no conclusive evidence that would establish that. In fact, until his better time of until the latter part of his incarceration, he was practically illiterate. He could hardly read or write. So he's been labeled as a criminal mastermind with super genius of crimes and a master manipulator of people. And in fact, this individual could hardly read or write. And every time he committed a crime, he got caught. If he stole an apple from a grocery store, he would get caught. And that is inconsistent with the notion and the grand aura that he was this criminal mastermind who motivated people to commit crimes and kill at his whim. And it's an interesting fact, and we'll leave this topic. And during the course of the trial, the lead prosecutor, Vincent Bugliosi, said that something very absurd. He said that at some point his eyes met with Charles Manson. Charles Manson winked at him, and the prosecutor at that very instant peered at his wristwatch, and his stopped, alluding that Charles Manson could stare at a person from a distance and cause that person's wristwatch to stop at his will. And this is an absurd notion, but the media bought it, and these were the nuances that caused a tremendous amount of hype and spin, and created Charles Manson into this criminal, the super being with superpowers, who was able to manipulate people and kill at his will.
Fascinating topic. We definitely have to have you back on that. I do apologize for taking so much of the time but once you got me started on that, it's great that you're so fresh, having just spoken to Manson. So we definitely want to have you back on that. Now, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Let's do it tomorrow, okay? Because I'm tired of talking about it. The Pierre Hotel, okay? How 8 gentlemen thieves plundered $28 million bucks in 1972. Can you imagine? Tell us the story.
Well, again, yes, it's hard to imagine $28 million in 1972 would equate to approximately $250 million, and that's a billion with a B at today's present value. But I'd like to point out that my collaborator, Nick Sacco, is the sole surviving perpetrator of the robbery. And as I mentioned earlier, he's currently in the Federal Witness Protection Program, but for a totally unrelated matter, nothing at all to do with the Pierre robbery.
Do you know where he's hidden the money? Let's get to the bottom line. I guess not. So let's get into the planning of the robbery. How did this whole thing come out there, the Pierre Hotel?
Yes. The robbery was planned and rehearsed repeatedly and meticulously by all the 8 perpetrators, and they were led by 2 exceptionally brilliant and astute jewel thieves. One is named Bobby Comfort, and the second was Sammy Nalo. And these 2 individuals were very, very meticulous in their planning and the way they carried out their robberies. They only specialized in robbing high-end, exclusive hotels in Manhattan. This was their specialty. In fact, approximately a year before they carried out the Pierre robbery, they robbed the Italian actress, Sophia Loren, at her suite in Manhattan and relieved her of approximately $1.5 million in jewels. So these two individuals organized, masterminded, and planned the robbery. And, of course, they also recruited the other 6 perpetrators, Nick Sacco being one of them. And this is how it all began. So they went on to seek the sanction and protection of the Lucchese family. That is the Lucchese, the New York Lucchese mafia family. And with the blessing of the consigliere of the Lucchese family, they proceeded to rehearse repeatedly, over and over, every detail and aspect of the robbery, including any possible problems or contingencies that they may encounter. In fact, just to demonstrate how meticulously, how well planned this entire heist was carried out, they even learned, more specifically, Nick Sacco learned how to operate the manned elevators of the Pierre. So that in the event one of the guests called for the elevator during the robbery, they would be able to respond and, of course, apprehend that guest so that the guest would not have reason to call someone on the outside out of suspicion that the elevators were not being manned. So this is just a point to show how well carried out the entire planning and affair was.
Yeah, wait, that's right, because back in those days, they still had elevator operators. When you went to get on an elevator back when we were kids, there was a guy in there who ran the elevator for you. They didn't have buttons, you know?
Yes, in the case of the Pierre, even to date, the elevators are manned.
Oh, really? Till this day? Oh, fascinating.
It's very, very unusual, very, very rare. But the Pierre, I guess, holds their traditions of in certain areas. And yes, the elevators are one of those traditions that they still are the old-fashioned types with the uniformed operator, manning it.
Now, how'd they learn that? Did they have a guy on the inside, or they just went in there and watched the guy do it?
No, Nick Sacco had a friend who was the superintendent of a building in Manhattan, and that building happened to have the same type of elevators that they did were in the Pierre.
Okay.
And, of course, Nick Sacco practiced with those elevators until he, in fact, called for the elevator. And Nick Sacco and one of his cohorts had to go up to that floor and apprehend him and his new bride. He had this guest had just got married that afternoon. And, of course, collared them and brought them to where they were holding the rest of the hostages. And the poor guy and his new bride and his mother-in-law became hostages along with the others.
So now these 8 guys, were they like tough guys, like thugs, or what was going on with that? Or old guys? What were they?
Well, it was a mix of characters. Nick Sacco was an imposing figure. He was 6'3", 260 pounds, with the build of a heavyweight boxer. He was very handy with his hands, and but he was not prone to violence. In fact, none of his robberies ever entailed violence, and took care and ensured that his victims were not harmed or injured in any way. And then, of course, one of the others was an individual whose primary career was as a hitman. He was a contract killer for the mafia, for the various mafia families in New York City, and his last name was Francos. They used to call him the Greek, Tony the Greek Francos. And yes, he was ruthless. He was a contract killer, but when he was recruited for the Pierre robbery, there was an understanding amongst all the 8 perpetrators that there would be no violence, and that the victims and the hostages would have to be treated with white gloves, that no one should be uncomfortable or injured in any way. In fact, at the end of the robbery, just before they were leaving the hotel, Bobby Comfort, the organizer of the robbery, gave each one of the hostages a $20 bill in appreciation for their inconvenience.
Wait, each one of the hostages, you said, or each one of the employees?
Each one of the hostages. And amongst the hostages were approximately 18 of the Pierre night skeleton crew. So there were approximately 18 hotel employees who had been taken hostage, and approximately 6 or 7 guests who happened to have been roaming in the lobby when the perpetrators barged into the complex.
Well, how'd they do this? They just went in there with guns blazing, or how'd they get in?
No, not at all. The hotel has a policy, and still does, where they close all the doors, they lock all the doors after 1 a.m.
Okay.
Any guest who returns to the hotel after the doors have been locked, ring a buzzer, and typically one of the security officers on duty during the night will respond, and upon verifying that that person is either a registered guest or a guest who has reservations for that night, of course, that person will be allowed in. So what they did, Bobby Comfort had made reservations for that particular night under an assumed name. And at about 1:30, not actually, to be more accurate, at about 2:45 a.m., he approached the side door where the intercom was, rang the bell. The security officer responded, and Bobby Comfort told him that he had reservations under an assumed name. I think the name that he used, if my memory serves me correct, was Dr. Foster. And the security officer confirmed it with the front desk that those reservations were, in fact, for that night, and unlocked the door and let Bobby Comfort in. As soon as Bobby Comfort walked into through the door, he took out his gun and put it to the man's head, to the security officer, and then the others who were hiding on the side of the door barged in. And of course, they corralled the other security officers and with the guests who were roaming around the lobby and any of the employees. And they proceeded to ransack the safe deposit boxes until roughly 5:45 that morning. So they actually held the entire complex under siege for nearly 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Well, incredible. Now, what were the hotel security guards? Were they armed guards?
They were armed guards. They were disarmed, of course.
Yeah.
The security officers in total on the night shift entailed 5 men. And they were, corralled along with the other hostages, handcuffed. And they were all brought into an alcove behind the front desk, and this is where they held them for 2 hours and 45 minutes, while the others were busy breaking into the safe deposit boxes.
And they made a movie around that same time called the Anderson Tapes, where they took over a hotel building and they went from apartment to apartment. Did they do this, or they just went to the safe deposit boxes?
They only went into the safe deposit boxes because it was presumed that the boxes would be full of valuables and cash, because the banks had closed on that Friday afternoon, and back in those days, banks were not open on Saturdays.
Right.
Banking hours were Monday through Friday, between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., and that was it. So this was the weekend of New Year's Day. And the robbery took place the day after, on the night of New Year's Day. In other words, technically speaking, on the early morning of January 2nd. And of course, it was presumed, incorrectly that is, that because banks would be closed from Friday till that following Monday, the guests would have had no option but to secure their valuables and cash in the hotel's safe deposit boxes. And that was one of the reasons why they were able to make off with nearly $28 million.
Wow. And back then, too, they didn't have any ATM machines, so they wouldn't have cash in their pockets. You'd keep cash in your pocket, over the weekend back in those days. How old are you, Daniel?
59.
59, yeah, I'm 55. I'm going to be 55. I'm going to be 55. I'm not 55 yet. It's a whole different world back in those days, back in the 70s. Just totally different world. And you were living in Manhattan when this went on, in New York?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So now they get out of there, $28 million. How much was that to carry? Did they have like suitcases or duffel bags to get all this stuff out?
They had four. They came in prepared with four large Louis Vuitton suitcases.
Okay.
And the reason why they chose Louis Vuittons is because if they were stopped or if some incident occurred after they had left the hotel with these four luggages full of jewels and cash, it would have been hard to conceive that burglars or robbers would have gone to a robbery with Louis Vuitton luggage.
Right.
So they're all dressed in tuxedos, the perpetrators, that is, and they gave the appearance that they were the remnants, the stragglers of the previous night's New Year's Eve revelry. And this is what the illusion that they gave. They pulled up to the hotel and left in a getaway car, which was a limousine.
Wow.
And one of their associates acted as the chauffeur, waited in the limousine throughout the entire robbery, and this is the way they carried out this high class act.
Incredible. Now, did they have like walkie-talkies so the guy outside could talk to the guys inside?
No,
really?
No, they
Wow.
did not. One of the perpetrators, specifically the contract killer, who I had described earlier, he took over the role of guarding the side entrance where a guest or a registered customer would come to ring the doorbell in order to be allowed in. And what he did, this individual, the perpetrator, he actually wore the jacket, the uniform type jacket that the security officers had. So anyone who would have been familiar with the hotel personnel would not have suspected him as not being one of the security guards because he wore the proper uniform, so to speak.
This is fascinating. Now, this is very well planned. Now, had they pulled other hotel jobs before this one?
Yes, this was their specialty. Robbing Manhattan hotels, and not only that, for example, Bobby Comfort, the organizer, as soon as they corralled and accounted for all the hostages, that is the night staff employees and the few guests who had been roaming around the lobby, he put on the concierge's jacket and manned the telephones because naturally it was expected that the phones would be ringing, people would be calling, even though it was nighttime, but nonetheless with 400 guests in the hotel at that very, very period, it was expected that the telephones would be ringing, and Bobby Comfort, one of his tasks was to answer and respond to the phone calls and handle any problems or anything that the guests might have wanted to who were calling, and in fact that also happens. Some guests were looking for additional towels. Some guests were looking for other items, and they obliged them. So it was all very, very well thought out.
So they had a couple guys cooking a room service for him in case they wanted a club sandwich running up there for him.
That they would have deferred.
Now, what about at this hotel at that time? Could the guests or the tenants call directly out of the hotel if they wanted to make a phone call out, or did they have to go through a switchboard in the lobby? Do you know?
They had to go through a switchboard in the lobby, but of course it was expected that during the night, the switchboard would be very, very slow in responding.
Oh.
And Bobby Comfort did his best to respond to all the calls that were coming in, and there weren't that many. Only about a half a dozen came in during that 2-hour and 45-minute period that they held the entire hotel on the siege.
And so they got it made. And what about, was there like a silent alarm, any kind of alarm system in there?
There was, and they were able to disarm the alarm system and the what they call the panic button as soon as they forayed into the hotel. They also took captive the individual who was close to the hidden panic button, so to speak, and that was the only alarm system. Nothing else was in place that was sophisticated or would be anywhere near as technically effective as the alarm systems that are available today.
Yeah, right. And plus, now everybody got cell phones. You forget it. There'd be calls going in and out of there 24 hours. Now, what about now? How did they get into these little safe deposit boxes? They use chisels, drills. How'd they get in there?
Yeah, with chisels and hammers. Yes.
Wow. Okay. I tell you, what an operation. Okay, so great. And then they got out of there that night. They got out on the clear that night, right? But did they get caught later?
Yes. No. What happened is that, as I mentioned, Bobby Comfort and Sammy Nalo, the two organizers, had robbed the Italian actress Sophia Loren a year earlier.
Right.
And an FBI agent who was assigned to the Loren case was actually tailing Bobby Comfort, suspecting that he might have been involved in the Loren robbery. And through an informant, they were able to confirm Sammy Nalo's identity and arrested him. When they arrested him, they were also able to arrest Bobby Comfort through a sheer coincidence. But the two of them did not admit to any wrongdoing, nor did they confess, nor did they identify any of their cohorts. And as a result, they were allowed to plead guilty to minor misdemeanors because the authorities could not prove their involvement in the Pierre robbery or the Loren robbery or any other robbery that they had committed in the past. And in order to ensure that everything would go smoothly, the Lucchese family bribed the presiding judge, and the presiding judge sort of persuaded the district attorney to allow Bobby Comfort and Sammy Nalo to plead guilty to minor misdemeanors, and they were only incarcerated for a period of 18 months, but again, never confessed or admitted to any wrongdoing, and never gave up their associates. And that is how the case ended. Nothing was recovered. But as far as the authorities are concerned, or were concerned, that is how the entire case was disposed of. And of course, amongst the 8 robbers, greed, lust came into play, and they started killing one another, stealing from one another, but of course I don't want to reveal too much. I want to leave some of the details and entertaining aspects of it for the reader to enjoy. But I suffice to say that what happened after the robbery is probably even more interesting than the robbery itself.
Yeah, the story sounds fascinating. I'm sure people are going to run out and buy the book. There's going to be a link. It's already on my Facebook and stuff like that, but we'll have it up too. And by the way, audience, I've been updating the blog, the Opperman Report, blogspot.com. I've been updating that. I was lazy about it for a few months there, but all the links to the books now and all the YouTube videos for the shows are up there, and I've been updating them constantly. So the Pierre Hotel affair, how 8 gentlemen thieves plundered $28 million in the largest jewel heist in history. So now when you talk to this guy, Nick the Cat Sacco, what do you call it? Was he able to keep any of that money, or did he lose it all? How's he doing today? Does he have money today?
No. Nick Sacco was very, very astute in how he handled his finances, and he kept his share of the money. As a matter of fact, according to the FBI agent who handled him, when he enlisted in the witness protection program, which happened around 1975 or 1976, a few years after the Pierre robbery. The FBI agent told me that Nick Sacco had amassed a fortune of approximately $11 million.
Wow.
Which, again, in the 70s, $11 million would equate to about $100 million of today's value. The others were not as fortunate. Some killed one another. Two of the perpetrators absconded with about $6 or $7 million of their associates' shares. So many of those types of incidents occurred, which is not unusual in such a robbery of where so much at stake was involved. But again, I don't want to reveal too many details and spoil it for the readers.
I just want to find out where the money is, okay? The rest, you can keep the book money to yourself. I want to find Nick Sacco's money. Let me ask you a question now. If this was shortly after, if the crime was in 1972, and he has another case coming up, he said around 74, 75, and he has $11 million cash sitting around in his pockets, and he's got these Lucchese guys who can pay off a judge, what were these unrelated charges that would motivate this man to turn against his friends and become a witness for the government?
It was a case totally unrelated to the Pierre robbery. Nick Sacco had known about a triple murder that took place around 1974, I believe, if my memory serves me correct. And the two killers were known to Nick Sacco, and when this triple murder it was a brutal triple murder. The victims were tortured before they were killed. It was one of the most savagest homicides in the history of New York City. And Nick Sacco had all the particulars as to who was involved. And at the same time, Nick Sacco had been arrested for an armed robbery. And he was facing 20, 30 years in prison because of that armed robbery. And at that point, with the knowledge that he had about those vicious triple homicides, he bartered for his freedom.
Well, now you've been talking to this guy. Why? Who in their right mind, if they're sitting on this kind of money, would go and do an armed robbery again after doing this? Why wouldn't you just take it easy? You buy a nightclub. You know?
Greed and nothing more.
So you're still talking...
Incorrigible greed. That's the term that I give it. Incorrigible greed.
And this armed robbery, how much was he looking to score on that job that he got caught for?
A couple of million.
Oh, my God. It just doesn't make sense. You know? Now, you still talk to this guy every day? Like you're in touch with him all the time?
Not every day, but I would say on the average of 2 to 3 times a week.
I'd love to get him on the show, too, if you could pull it off for me, okay? I got some questions for this.
He would be delighted. He would be delighted to be on the show.
Oh, I would love that. I tell you, I'll find out where you got the money hit, okay? And I'll call you. I'm going to need a driver for that job. Now, you said some stuff here. You sent me over some notes. You said that there was some comedic aspects to the Pierre robbery. What do you got there?
Well, for example... I mentioned about the guest who had called for the elevator, and naturally nobody responded because the elevator operator, there was only one on duty at night, had already been taken hostage, and so Nick Sacco took the elevator up to that floor, and with another one of his cohorts. And when they finally reached the floor where the guest, was calling from, they took him at gunpoint back into his suite. And
when your celebration of life is prepaid in advance, it becomes a gift from you to your family later, because no one should have to plan for a loss while they're experiencing one. Paying in advance protects your loved ones and gives you the peace of mind you deserve. Let us help you plan every detail with professionalism and compassion. We're your local Dignity Memorial provider. Find us at dignitymemorial.com.
Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy killed 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series, John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now, only on Peacock.
He he had just got married that afternoon, so in his suite was his bride of approximately 10 or 12 hours, and his mother-in-law was also in his suite. So they woke up the mother-in-law and his wife and marched him down to the lobby where they were holding captive the other hostages. When this new hostage was taken into the room where the others were, one of the women who had already been taken hostage, a young, voluptuous, beautiful redhead, started screaming and yelling and wanting to kick him and lung at him. And, of course, everyone was flabbergasted. Why was this woman all of a sudden screaming and yelling and wanting to hurt and kick and punch this new individual who had just been brought in as a hostage? Turns out that she was his girlfriend, his mistress. And the reason why he was calling for the elevator was that he waited for his wife and mother-in-law to finally go to sleep, and he had dressed again, and of course he had a meeting with her in a room, in a second room that he had rented in the hotel. So that was his reason and purpose for having called the elevator. And, of course, his rendezvous, his dalliance with his mistress was foiled because she had been taken hostage.
Well, can you blame this guy for having a girlfriend if his wife brings the mother-in-law on the honeymoon in the honeymoon suite? Who can blame the guy for calling the elevator to go see the girlfriend? But now, wouldn't the girlfriend know that he was getting married? The girlfriend didn't know he was getting married? You kidding me?
No, she didn't know that he was married. But let me clarify the reason why this individual had his mother-in-law with him.
Okay.
These people were Brazilians. They were very wealthy Brazilians. And in Brazil, as is the case in many other parts of South America, it is a custom for the mother-in-law to accompany the bride and groom on their honeymoon. And this is the reason why the mother-in-law happened to have been present, in the suite after he had just gotten married that afternoon.
And I guess the bride's father, he's off with his girlfriend too, right?
Probably back in Brazil.
He's back in Brazil with his girlfriend. Oh, this is great stuff. Now, you said also too, real quick, that there was the NYPD and the FBI weren't getting along in the investigation.
Back in those days, the NYPD was rampantly corrupt.
Yeah.
The corruption was so rampant that the mayor of that period, the New York City mayor of that period, convened what they called the NAP Commission to investigate the New York City Police Department's corruption. And conversely, the FBI could never be corrupted. They were much more professional, more credible, more honest, and in most cases more efficient as law enforcement agents.
And Daniel, we have a commercial coming up, so we'll finish this when we get back. With Daniel Simone, his website is danielsimone.net. We're talking about the Pierre Hotel affair, how 8 gentlemen thieves plundered $28 million in the largest heist in history. And then when we get back, we're going to be talking about the Lufthansa heist behind the $6 million cash haul that shook the world. You can catch Daniel in person at, Mysterious Bookshop, Tuesday, May 23rd from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at 58 Warren Street in Manhattan. That's danielsimone.net. We'll be right back with more of Daniel Simone and the Pierre Hotel affair after these messages.
Welcome to the world's meeting place. American.
It's practically narcotics.
Freedom.
Oh, yes. I like very much.
Radio.
And personal ads are either married or in a monogamous relationship. 30%. If you suspect that your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may be cheating online, go to emailrevealer.com. And our online infidelity investigation. You give us their email address, and we can trace it back to online personal ads, dating sites, and social networks. We can even expand the investigation and find them cheating on escort service sites or even porn sites if they're registered to porn sites and swinger sites. So check out emailrevealer.com if you suspect your spouse is cheating, and check out our online infidelity investigation. William Ramsey is a producer here at the Opperman Report, and he's just come out with a new book, Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. Now, he just sent me a copy of this book. Oh boy, it's about 2 inches thick, and there's a chapter on just about everybody in this book that you can imagine. The Beatles, and Jack Parsons, everybody's in here. It's incredible. And I definitely recommend this book. There's a bunch of pictures in here, too, of all these people in different chapters and information. Anton LaVey and people I've never heard of, too. There's a whole bunch in here. JFC Fuller. I don't know who he is. But it's great stuff by our producer here, William Ramsey. So check out Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. You can find it on Amazon.com, or you could find it in the Opperman Report.com bookstore. We have an urgent bulletin. It seems that the group Strawman is still on the loose. It has been confirmed that Strawman are Canadian, okay, and that authorities are asking people to stay indoors, lock your doors and windows until this group can be dealt with. You could find more information about this group of Canadians, at strawmanmusic.com. You can have your ad played here. Okay, we're looking for sponsors. Okay, in fact, we desperately need sponsors right now to take this show to the next level. So you can have your ad played here, read live, like I'm doing now, so artfully. Or we can even work up a little jingle for you with some music and stuff like that and play it here. You have no idea how inexpensive it would be to have your ad played on the Opperman Report on 7 stations. Live Friday night, and another 7 stations live on Saturday night, plus replayed every day of the week on different stations, and then archived on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and all different kinds of podcasts, Pod This and Podbean, all different kinds of places who archive the show for us. And on those archives, your ad would play indefinitely, forever. You also get a little banner on OppermanReport.com. You get a mention on the air. You get a little interview on the air, and all kinds of fun stuff if you sponsor Opperman Report. We have an opportunity to get this show on a major AM/FM station in California. We've been approved. So if you want to sponsor us into that, so incredibly inexpensive that your ad would be heard by a the range covers 5 million people in population where your ad would be broadcast, and all these other stations would be thrown in for free. So really affordable prices to sponsor OppermanReport.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can get a copy of that book at emailrevealer.com, or you can get a copy of that book now. It's back up on Amazon.com. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're joined today by Daniel Simone. His website is danielsimone.net. You can check that out. He's been telling us this fascinating story about his latest book called The Pierre Hotel Affair, how 8 gentlemen thieves plundered $28 million in the largest jewel heist in history. And that's co-written by one of the burglars, one of the guys who actually did the heist, Nick the Cat Sacco. And I was looking on Amazon over here. It's already got 5-star reviews. Who was the publisher on that again, Daniel?
Pegasus International.
Pegasus International. I got to tell you, too, they're very professional, too. The way they helped me book you on the show, very professional operation they got going on there. I was very impressed with it. Now, you were saying before the break about how NYPD was so incredibly corrupt back in the 70s, which was notorious. Serpico, the Knapp Commission, all this kind of stuff. So they weren't sharing information back and forth with the FBI. Is that what was going on?
Not only that they weren't sharing information with the FBI, and of course, respectively, neither was the FBI sharing information with the NYPD, but they were actually undermining one another when it came to the resolution of the case. So rather than collaborating, they actually worked against each other. And in my opinion, I think that that probably was in favor of the perpetrators, because if all sources had been pulled together, and if all law enforcement agencies involved in the investigation corroborated in unison, it's very possible that they may have had more success in solving the case and perhaps even apprehending some of the other perpetrators who, to date, and I literally to date, are still unknown to the authorities.
And in the book, does Nick Sacco mention them? Does he name them?
Yes, Nick Sacco is mentioned in the book. He's also listed as the co-author of the book.
No, I know that, but does he name the other guys?
I'm sorry, Ed?
Does he name the other guys, the 8 other guys? Does he name them?
Yes, so all the other individuals who were involved in the robbery are all not only named and identified in my book, but they're also cast as characters in the book. Right. But until my book was published last week, the authorities still did not know who was involved in the robbery.
Now, I guess they can't go after the money because it's way past the statute of limitations, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So they got away scot-free.
They did, those who survived, but some were killed by some of the other perpetrators. 1 or 2 was killed in unrelated incidents. But again, I don't want to reveal too much on that level, so that the reader will have sufficient, surprises to be entertained with.
But now, the other 8 guys that Nick Sacco has mentioned, right, he's named in your book, if we were to look up their family members, would we see that their family members are very successful and, own businesses and a lot of properties and hotels and stuff? Or would we not see that?
No, because not much was known about their families.
Okay.
I would not know what results may come up if one were to research the backgrounds and kins and of these other individuals who were involved.
Now, what is his? I don't want to call them co-defendants because they were never in a case together. But with these co-robbers, with his friends who did this job with him, did he remain friends with all these guys, or was there just too much bad blood, shooting and robbing each other and ripping each other off and stuff?
No. After the robbery, when all the dust settled, when all the arguments were settled, one way or the other, none of the 8 individuals remained associated or even on an amicable basis with one another.
Did they all leave off on good terms with the Lucchese family?
Yes. In respect to the Lucchese family, they remained in good standing. They remained amicable. The Lucchese family was paid what they were due, which was 35% of the haul, and they were satisfied and happy. So there was no grievances on the part of the Lucchese family.
Fascinating stuff, man. And that book is called The Pierre Hotel Affair, How 8 Gentlemen Thieves Plundered $28 Million. Now, on that case, is there any questions I didn't ask you that you think are important? Do you want to get that story across?
I'd like to let the listeners... I would like to introduce Nick Sacco more particularly to the listeners, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Nick Sacco, as I mentioned earlier, was a very imposing individual physically. And he was very capable. He could handle himself in a physical confrontation. He was very proficient as an armed robber, and ensured that there should never be any violence when he perpetrated a robbery. And he didn't. His record is flawless when it comes to being absolutely careful in not hurting or injuring any of his victims. He had a wife who ultimately, from whom he ultimately separated and divorced, and remarried one of his victims.
Get out of here.
Yeah, a wealthy young woman whom he had robbed at gunpoint wound up ultimately that they married. Again, not to reveal too much of the details and the enchanting aspects of the story. I don't really want to delve in it any deeper, but that was one very, very unexpected twist that occurred within the story. So the story is not only about a robbery. It's about lust. It's about romance. It's about greed. It's about betrayal. So it has all the elements that would interest every aspect of society, so to speak.
And where did they go for their honeymoon? Did they go to Alcatraz?
Las Vegas. Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. That's even worse. Okay. Well, wait a second. I got to ask a question, though. Like, what happened? He robbed her, then they ran into each other again years later, or they exchanged phone numbers during the robbery? I gotta know that. Sort of.
But again, it's. I'm not allowed, to reveal too many details because naturally my publisher would be upset at me. But that was one of the most enchanting aspects of the story. And again, Nick Sacco was when he enlisted in the Federal Witness Protection Program, became a very reliable, effective informant, and his relationship with the FBI flourished. And even to date, the FBI agents who worked with him still praise him for his reliability, his honesty, and how he efficiently was able to testify against some felons whom the FBI had targeted, again, unrelated to the Pierre robbery. But the point is that he's a sensible individual, very unusual for a career criminal to be as astute, as sensible as he was and still is. And he even got the endorsement of the FBI for working with them. So he's the type of person who survived his life of criminalities because he has an above-average astuteness and common sense.
So he's since he's become a cooperating witness, he's stayed out of trouble in his career as a witness for the FBI.
No, he didn't, actually.
Okay.
When he entered the Federal Witness Protection Program, at some point, he began robbing banks with the famous Black Panther leader, Huey Newton.
Get out of here.
Does that name sound familiar?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're big fans of the Black Panthers here. We've had Black Panthers on here all the time. So he was robbing banks with Huey Newton.
Yes, while he was in the Federal Witness Protection Program.
Fascinating. Now, has that come out publicly that people know that Huey Newton was robbing banks with an FBI informant?
Well, they were caught on one of the bank robberies, and of course, Huey Newton was convicted and sent to prison. And then later, in 1987, I believe, Huey Newton was killed during a drug transaction.
Now, how did he meet Huey Newton? And this was probably before Huey Newton became involved with the Black Panthers, right?
I'm sorry?
Was he doing these jobs with Huey Newton before Huey Newton became involved with the Black Panthers?
No, during the period that Huey Newton was still with the Black Panthers.
How did they meet each other?
I don't know the details, and it's really outside the scope of the Pierre Hotel story, but I believe they met one another through a gun sale transaction. In other words, Nick Sacco was providing Huey Newton with weapons, and Huey Newton, of course, distributed those weapons amongst his members of the Black Panther group.
So while Nick Sacco...
That was a transaction where, as to how they met.
So while Nick Sacco is working for the FBI undercover, but he's a witness for the FBI testifying in cases, he's doing bank robberies and gun deals with the Black Panthers. Now, right under the FBI's nose, because the FBI was all over the Black Panthers, the FBI had no idea he was selling guns to the Black Panthers, or was that part of his undercover work? Do you know?
No, the authorities never knew.
You got to get this guy on my show. Okay, we got to get this guy on.
He would be delighted. He would be delighted to be on your show.
Not as delighted as I will be. Okay, this is great stuff. I'd say, and by the way, too, I got to say one thing to you. I know a lot of authors come on the show and they say, hey, I don't want to give all the details because then people won't buy the book. What I find is that if the author is a likable person and makes a connection with the audience, that the audience that's the motivating factor for people to run out and buy the book. And you're an incredibly likable guest. I think you're making a great connection.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're making a great connection with the audience. I can see in the chat room, everybody's loving it. Now, out of all,
quite flattering. I thank you very much.
Well, I'm trying to get you to help me book guests. I got to be nice to you. Let me ask you a question, man. Out of all these characters you've been dealing with, Charlie Manson, Henry Hill, and Nick Sacco, if you had to be locked in a room with one of them, which one would you choose? Probably Sacco, right?
Neither one of them. No, actually, I was only kidding. Actually, probably Nick Sacco would be the one whom I would choose to be locked in the room with.
And second choice is Henry Hill, or is that
he's the most predictable.
Okay, yeah. And plus the most successful at what he did too. You know.
Yes.
Fascinating. Yeah. This is fascinating. You know, I tell you, you pick great topics, man. You know, great characters and great topics. You must really enjoy what you do, huh?
I do. It's a lot of work, Ed. It's a tremendous amount of perseverance and intensity and focus that is required in developing this type of project. Endless hours, I must say. Endless hours. There are no holidays. There is no Sunday or Saturday. But it's something that I enjoy, and it's a way of life. I have a wife who supports me wholeheartedly. She's a wonderful woman. And she is constantly in support of my endeavors, and she's my biggest champion. So she's one of the elements requisite for me to be able to continue these endeavors uninterrupted and unchallenged.
Now, do you have this great relationship with your wife? Do you expose your wife to people like Henry Hill, or you keep her totally separate?
No, I have in the past.
Okay.
If the occasion arose, I have. Of course, I can't expose her to Charles Manson because Charles Manson is in a maximum security penitentiary.
Right. Plus, we don't want to get him too excited. Okay, so tell us now. You the whole idea when you did the Lufthansa heist behind the $6 million cash haul that shook the world. Now, this was after the movie Goodfellas had already come out, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you said you met him at a charity thing. You got a hold of Henry Hill. Tell us the story. What did Henry tell you about how the whole Lufthansa heist went down?
Well, what happened, it all began when a Lufthansa shipping clerk, a supervising shipping clerk, who worked for Lufthansa, a degenerate, incorrigible gambler, owed a a bookmaker who was an associate of Henry Hill approximately $30,000 in gambling debts. And when the bookmaker began applying pressure on the Lufthansa shipping clerk, the Lufthansa shipping clerk said, you know what, in all honesty, I don't really have the money to repay you anytime soon. But I can help you. I can give you all the assistance and details and particulars to strategize and execute a robbery at the Lufthansa cargo building where high valuable items and cash were stored from time to time. So the bookmaker accepted this bartering idea, but he himself did not have the wherewithal or the manpower capable of pulling off such a heist. And the bookmaker brought the idea to Henry Hill. Henry Hill liked the idea, and he brought it to the attention of his crew chief, whose name was Jimmy Burke, Jimmy the Gent Burke. And Jimmy Burke, who was an astute criminal, and also with the backing of the Lucchese crime family, coincidentally, was able to assemble a crew of 6 armed robbers, and with the Lufthansa shipping clerk's logistics and assistance, they were able to carry out the robbery flawlessly without injuring anyone or without any particular incident.
And now, when Henry was telling you about this story, was he puffing himself up, saying that he was more involved? Because when you watch the movie, it seemed like he wasn't really involved at all.
No, Henry wasn't involved at all. Henry only brokered this arrangement between the Lufthansa shipping clerk and Jimmy Burke. But Henry himself had no further involvement in the robbery itself, because at that same time, while Jimmy Burke began planning the Lufthansa robbery, Henry was up in Boston scheming to do a point-shaving scheme in conspiracy with 3 Boston College basketball players. So he was involved in his own scheme during the same time, which became one of the biggest sports scandals in American history. This happened in 1979, where Henry Hill and 3 of the Boston College players, the name of the team is the Eagles, the Boston Eagles, conspired to shave points, and Henry Hill and his associates would bet against the bookmakers' odds for that particular game, and of course they were guaranteed winnings. So that's what Henry Hill was doing while Jimmy Burke was planning the Lufthansa robbery.
So in Lufthansa, there was that wasn't, it was all an inside job. So they just walked in and picked up the money and walked out. They didn't really have to pull out any guns, or did they?
No, they did. They did. In fact, the Lufthansa robbery was also executed during the night when the night shift was manned by a skeleton crew, and the 6 armed robbers forayed into the cargo building and held captive the 11 Lufthansa employees, including the night supervisor, and with the supervisor's assistance. The fact of the matter is that they held them at gunpoint and forced them to disarm the alarm of what they called the high-value vault, where all the money and high-valuable items were stored. Disarmed the alarm and they forced them to open this high-value vault. And, of course, they loaded the packets and bundles of cash and certain jewelry that was also stored in the vault at that particular point in time. They loaded a van they loaded everything inside a van, and they handcuffed the night staff individuals that they had already held captive, and drove out calmly and peacefully out of the complex and ultimately out of Kennedy Airport.
Amazing, and they got away with $6 million. Now. $6
let's take into consideration that $6 million in 1978 would probably be equivalent to 40 or 50 million at present value.
Yeah, it's so true. Like my parents we rented a house on Staten Island. We were paying $300 a month, for a 3-bedroom house, back in the 70s. My God. Now, how did that whole thing fall apart? Because in the movie they show that Burke just started killing everybody.
He did, and for two reasons. One, he wanted to ensure that none of his cohorts would possibly become witnesses against him should they be confronted by the authorities. And secondly, he didn't want to pay them an equal share of the haul, so he decided that it would be cheaper to kill them. And for those two reasons, he just...
Introducing Peacock, the new free streaming service from NBC Universal. It's hit movies, current shows, live sports, trending bits, and timeless hits. And that's why you can't not watch. Peacock. Watch for free. Upgrade for more. Stream now at peacocktv.com. Law & Order SVU streaming now. Peacock fuels your true crime obsession with exclusive new originals like John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise.
He said to me, clowns can get away with murder.
Dr. Death, the undoctored story.
This guy's dangerous.
And Epstein's shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell.
She inherited Jeffrey Epstein's secrets.
There was this whole other world going on.
Plus the most bingeable crime series, Buried in the Backyard and Snapped. And with the Dateline 24/7 channel that's always on.
Did you want her dead?
You can't not obsess. Sign up now at peacocktv.com.
Decided to go through with his decision and wound up killing 13 individuals who were directly or indirectly involved with the heist. And the only reason why Henry Hill escaped getting killed is also two reasons. One, Henry did not demand any money because once he saw that Jimmy Burke was adamant about sharing the loot with his cohorts, he was smart enough not to demand a share. And secondly, by coincidence, he had been arrested on narcotics charges immediately after the Lufthansa robbery and had not been granted bail. So he was in the safe haven of the county jail awaiting a trial. So for those two reasons, Henry Hill was spared, and then the FBI persuaded Henry to become an informant against Jimmy Burke because they reasoned with him at whether Henry Hill would testify or not testify against Jimmy Burke. Jimmy Burke had already slated to kill him because he would not have taken the chance that someday later, once Henry would have been sentenced to 15 or 20 or 30 years, Burke did not want the chance that Henry would wake up one morning in his cell and decide that he no longer wanted to live as a prisoner and would ultimately most probably decide to cooperate with the authorities. So for that reason, Jimmy Burke had already decided that at some point Henry Hill was going to be a dead man, and the FBI brought this to Henry Hill's attention, and that's when Henry decided to become an informant and enlist in the Federal Witness Protection Program.
And so when Henry told you that story, did you buy that story, or did you think he was just trying to get out of his drug charges?
Well, no. This is actually what happened.
Okay.
I also let me clarify that in my development of the Lufthansa project and manuscript, I also had the collaboration of the U.S. attorney who was in charge of the Lufthansa investigation, and I had the immeasurable cooperation of the two FBI agents who led the investigation. So they all corroborated Henry's version of the story.
So that absolutely Burke was going to kill Hill.
In actuality, the FBI had recorded telephone conversations wherein Burke had discussed how and when he was going to kill Henry with one of his associates. So with the evidence of those tape recordings, Henry became convinced that, yes, the FBI was correct in predicting that he would have been a dead man regardless of whether he testified or not.
And what about that scene in the movie where Henry's wife went to meet Burke and they were going to? It seemed like they were plotting to kill her too. Was that reality or just?
No, Yes, but not exactly the way it was portrayed in the film. But yes, Jimmy Burke also had designs to ultimately kill Henry's wife because she had sufficient information to testify against Jimmy Burke as well. Yes, she was definitely slated to get whacked, as they called it.
Fascinating. Now, how about all of that money? Has any of that money been recovered?
No, nothing
right?
at all. Nothing at all, and no one really knows what happened to the money. It's surmised, it's assumed that one of Jimmy Burke's daughters may have stashed or inherited whatever money was left after Jimmy Burke went to prison.
And does anybody know how she's living now? Does she live in a wealthy lifestyle, or do we know?
Not that's apparent. No, there is no opulent, outward lifestyle that she is leading, or at least not publicly. So nothing that's apparent. No.
And what does Hill think happened to the money? He thinks Burke's daughter got it.
Some of the money was paid in tribute to the Lucchese family. Some of the money was paid to John Gotti as well. John Gotti assisted in assembling all the components of the robbery, and the rest of the bulk of it, it's presumed that Jimmy Burke kept it because he certainly did not share it with his associates. As I mentioned, he killed them. He decided to kill every one of them. So it's a safe assumption that Jimmy Burke retained the bulk of the money and ultimately wound up in the hands of one of his daughters.
Didn't Burke have a son too, or am I mistaken?
He had a son, and he was killed in a drug transaction.
Okay.
He wasn't very bright. He was not as intelligent as his father, and matter of fact, he did something very foolish. The reason why he was whacked, he sold what they called floured cocaine to a drug dealer. In other words, he would mix flour with cocaine and sell it as pure top quality cocaine, and one of these drug dealers whom he was trying to fool had the ability to test the quality of this so-called high quality cocaine and discovered that it was floured or diluted with flour, and had him killed.
So he was killed there, right there during the drug deal, or afterwards he sold him the drugs and they came and got him later on?
It was arranged through a third party, so that the actual killers were never found, or the case was never solved in reality.
Do you know how old he was when he was killed, the son?
If I were to guess, I would say about 29, 30 years old.
Did the son write a book too? There was a family member of Burke that wrote a book, right?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm not aware of it.
Okay. Well, let's see. What other stuff did Hill talk about besides the Lufthansa heist?
Well, the Boston College point shaving scheme was quite an operation. In fact, a documentary was broadcast, was produced and broadcast by ESPN, and won an Emmy Award, actually. It entailed Henry and 2 or 3 of his drug dealing associates from Pittsburgh, and they somehow were able to recruit 3 players who played for the Boston Eagle college basketball team. And these 3 players managed to shave points and bring in the final score of the games under or over the bookmakers' odds for that particular game. And they would bet against the odds, and of course, they were guaranteed to win. But an interesting thing happened that foiled the entire operation. At some point, after several games that had been point shaved, the New York City bookmakers were no longer accepting bets from Henry on college basketball because they smelled some foul play. They suspected that some kind of a scheme was going on because Henry was betting too heavily against the odds. And when one individual alone bets a huge sum of money against the odds, at that point, the bookmakers become weary and suspicious. So it reached a point where the bookmakers decided not to accept any more bets from Henry Hill on college basketball games. And, of course, their suspicions were correct. So what they did, Henry and his associates pulled together $180,000 in cash and consigned it to one of the other individuals who was involved in the point-shaving scheme to drive to Las Vegas and bet against the Las Vegas bookmakers who were unwitting and unsuspecting of this foul play that was going on back in Boston. So the individual who drove to Las Vegas with the money, and of course he was supposed to bet the day before the game was to be played. When he arrived in Vegas, he called Henry on the telephone and said, "Listen, I got some bad news." So Henry said, "Listen, don't tell me you lost the money." He said, No, I didn't lose the money. But I got here late, and I just did not make the window." Meaning, not making the window meant that he hadn't arrived in time to bet before the bookmaker's deadline. But that wasn't true. He did make the window. He did bet the money, and he kept the winnings.
Oh, my.
So when he returned to the East Coast, he only refunded to Henry and Jimmy Burke the original $180,000, and he kept all the winnings.
How did Henry find out?
Through other sources, it ultimately came to light that's what this individual had done. His name is Paul Maffei. He's still alive, and he had confirmed it that he did that. He actually confirmed it to me, jokingly, and Jimmy Burke, of course, never believed him in the first place, and had definitely plans on whacking him. But then when Jimmy Burke was arrested after Henry Hill testified against him, other priorities took place, and for that reason, Paul Maffei was spared his life.
So they never had a chance to go after him and get their money back from this guy?
No, they never did, and Paul Maffei is alive and well. Although he was convicted for his part in the Boston College basketball point-shaving scheme and went to prison for several years, but he never gave up the money that he stole from Henry and Jimmy Burke.
Now, was Hill going and testifying against his buddies in the point-shaving scam, too?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Henry gave up about 48 people in all.
You see, man, like, okay, you want to say, fine, he had to give up Burke because he didn't want to get killed by Burke. But then he's giving up his friends, man, with the gambling stuff. Come on, man. You know?
Well, his deal that with the FBI to be relieved of the narcotics charges entailed for him to disclose every illicit deed and every criminal act that he was aware of, not only by himself, but also by acts that were criminal crimes that were perpetrated by his associates and friends. That was the arrangement, and he was forthright in maintaining that agreement. So when he was debriefed by the FBI, he had told them whatever he knew about any crimes that any one of his former associates or friends had committed.
I got a question from the chat room. They're asking when Hill became an informant and goes into the witness protection program, were they giving him like a monthly stipend, like a salary, while he was working for them?
Yes. Yes, they typically receive a monthly salary, tax-free. In many cases, they also are paid a certain amount in advance because they have to start a new life. They're not easily employable. So they're typically customarily given a certain amount of money in advance and then a monthly salary.
Now, what about in the movie Goodfellas? They show a scene where they went down to Florida, I think it was, and they were dangling a guy over a lion cage or something like that to collect some money from him.
That never happened. That was Martin Scorsese's imagination and creation. That never happened.
None of that ever happened. He didn't get busted on that or anything like that? No.
There was an incident when they had to collect money from someone in Florida, a restaurant owner who was not willing to easily repay what he owed the Lucchese family, and they had to rough him up a bit. But no, they didn't dangle him over the cage of a lion. It turns out that this individual who owed the money took a beating. His sister, coincidentally, happened to have been a clerk for the FBI office somewhere in Florida, and she complained to some of the FBI agents whom she was working with, and for that reason, the case that would have been a state jurisdiction was elevated to a federal offense, and the FBI got involved, and that's when Henry and everybody else were arrested.
So they were arrested on charges of collecting some money, but no lion cage. Now,
extortion and an assortment of charges along that nature.
How did Henry feel about his portrayal in the movie?
He thought he was portrayed accurately. I don't agree. There was no physical resemblance between Henry and Ray Liotta, who portrayed him in the film. I don't think the portrayal was accurate, although I must say that Ray Liotta performed brilliantly. The film was scripted and directed absolutely brilliantly and entertainingly. But I don't agree with Henry's opinion that he was accurately portrayed.
Because, do you think that, because if Henry, most of his life, his public life that we know about him, was, like a pretty sloppy kind of a, mess up, you kind of goes like a guy, he's an F up, you know what I mean? He's messing up everything he gets involved in. So that, I can't believe that, his career as a criminal could be as professional as Ray Liotta portrayed himself,
He wasn't. Henry scraped and bumped and tripped, every time he perpetrated a crime. So he was not someone who, and also of equal importance, Henry did not have any propensities for violence. He bragged on numerous interviews that he killed this one and he whacked that one. But in my opinion, I don't believe that he had any propensities for violence whatsoever.
Mm. Yeah, more like the stuff and brokering at the robbery. Yeah, for other thing. Okay. Well,
petty crimes, hijackings, truck hijackings at Kennedy Airport, extortion or attempted extortion, gambling, those types of felonies. But Henry did not have propensities to kill someone or inflict serious bodily harm or injury.
Yeah, and scams like where they burned his restaurant down, stuff like that, right?
Well, things like that, yes, he did. That's absolutely accurate, and it did happen, yes. But maybe helping perhaps bury a body, he might have had some sort of involvement in doing something like that. That's a possibility, but I would say that would be the extent of it.
Well, stuff like, sometimes you got no choice, Now, in your life, in your personal life, Daniel Simone, from danielsimone.net. I was looking at your biography, and it says that you studied law. Did you actually become a lawyer?
No, I just had interest in criminal law, and I took 2 semesters at St. John's University in Flushing, Queens. I also, as a hobby, I used to follow high-profile criminal cases. But no, I never intended to be a lawyer or practice law in any way, shape, or form. But I did always had interest in high-profile cases and crimes. I found them fascinating at times. And many crimes that have been carried out are, in fact, fascinating.
Oh, I totally agree with you. But now, in your personal life, have you run across? Because a lot of people would be intimidated to deal with someone like Nick. The Cat Sacco, and Charles Manson, and Henry Hill. Even in your personal life, have you run across these kind of people in your personal life, organized crime figures and stuff?
I Yes, I grew up in a neighborhood that was infested with this element.
Right.
And I watched them. I watched them the way they operate. I've absorbed their propensities, their mentalities. But I was never intimidated by them because there's really no reason to be. Unless one has intentions of either crossing them or doing something that will provoke them to cause you harm. But otherwise, I had no reason to fear them.
Yeah, I grew up in Staten Island, so I know what you're talking about. You grew up in this; these were your friends' fathers, your friends' uncles. You know, these were just people you knew. I remember you talk about the Lucchese family. That guy Anthony Casso, his son was in high school with me. It was, you know, and I remember the teacher asking him, "Is that your dad? Is that your dad in the papers?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's my dad." You know, so it's you know, growing up in Staten Island, you saw all these names all the time. Now.
Yes.
I'm looking at the notes here, too. Now, you have on May 21st, which is tomorrow, 9 p.m., a documentary is going to be on Reels about the Lufthansa heist called The Shocking Truth, and it premieres on Reels with an episode called Goodfellas on Sunday, May 21st, 9 p.m. That's tomorrow, right?
That is correct. Yes, tomorrow at 9 p.m.
So it's never been on before?
No, this is a premiere of this particular series, and also speaking of, I'm featured in this documentary as well.
Okay.
And speaking of Jimmy Burke, the organizer of the Lufthansa robbery, on Wednesday, the 24th, at the same channel, the Reels channel, at 9 p.m., they will broadcast a documentary about the life and criminal career of Jimmy Burke, and I'm also featured in that documentary, as is Henry Hill. In fact, that was the last public appearance that Henry Hill made before he passed on. And that will be on Wednesday, the 24th, at 9 p.m. on the Reels channel.
Now, Reels is a channel? It's on TV? It's called the Reels channel?
Yes.
I don't think I get that.
REELZ.
Yeah, and that's like, what cable company has that? Because that's not on basic cable, I guess. I don't think I get it.
To the best of my knowledge, they will carry it.
Oh, really? Okay, I got to look for it. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, because I'm in Vegas, so you think, hey, what about, are your books carried over there at the Mob Museum here in Vegas?
Yes. In fact, in November, I will be hosting an event at the Mob Museum. I don't know the exact date yet, but I will be hosting an event and a book signing session as well, sometime in the early part of November.
Okay, great. Yeah, we have those guys on all the time. Danny Griffin and Nick Collada. We've had, not Nick Collada, Frank Collada. Frank Collada. Oh, you met Frank?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. He's a local favorite around here. Oh, I had him on the show, and the next day I was, I had to go do a bunch of stuff. I was hosting the sheriff's debate the next day, and my daughter had a banquet for high school, and I kept everyone I went to. I says, hey, I had Frank Collada on the show last night. Everybody I ran into said, yeah, I know Frank Collada. Like, everybody still knows this guy. He's a Las Vegas fixture out here. You know?
He's one of the local characters in Las Vegas.
Yeah, another one, the last man standing, just like your guy here, Sacco,
Yes. Miraculously, he survived. Miraculously.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely got to hook me up with him. So let's think here. What else can I ask you here?
Perhaps when I am in Vegas in November, you and I can meet in person.
You know what? I would enjoy that. I really would. I have not been down to the Mob Museum yet. So I'll come down there and I'll buy you a drink.
It's fascinating. I would recommend for you to visit.
Yeah, I know. I've walked past it a million times, because it's right there off the Fremont Street, and I've seen it 100 times.
Yeah.
I've walked past, just never got around to it. So, is there anything else with the Lufthansa story that you want to share with us?
One interesting fact. Some people already know about it, but possibly, I'm sure many people have watched the film Goodfellas so many times are not aware of it. But the prosecutor, the U.S. attorney who was in charge of the Lufthansa investigation, his name is Ed McDonald. And he was instrumental in sponsoring Henry in the Federal Witness Protection Program. And Ed McDonald, the former U.S. attorney, played himself in the film Goodfellas.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes. And he extended himself to me immensely during the development of the manuscript. So I'm grateful for his cooperation and his assistance, and I promote him whenever I can.
Hey, the name is very familiar to me. What other cases was McDonald involved in? Do you know?
One case that I'm fully aware of course, is the Boston College basketball point shooting scheme that we were discussing earlier.
Okay.
And the famous app scam case. You may or may not recall that back in the, I believe, the early 80s when several politicians, high-ranking politicians, were caught up in a sting called the app scam sting by the FBI. These were corrupt politicians who were accepting bribes for different reasons, and Ed McDonald was one of the prosecutors of that famous FBI operation.
Yeah, they just came out with a great movie on that with Christian Bale. It's an excellent movie.
Yes.
Yeah, and I definitely remember
American Hustle.
Yeah, right. I definitely remember Abscam. Hey, I got one more question though about Charles Manson. Okay, you mentioned before about how he was involved in prostitution, right? With these prostituting these women. Now he had an actual escort service company called, I think it was called Star Entertainment. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay.
No.
He didn't mention that to you at all.
No. No. What was that about?
Okay. See, because that's one of the things, and it came out in a documentary called 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter by Scott Michaels. An excellent documentary about Manson. And Manson had a partner in that business who he actually, I think he shot the partner in the butt, and he thought the guy died, but he survived it. But he had a business, an actual escort service with an office and desks and telephones and everything. Did Manson talk about any of that to you?
No, and based on my research and what I know of him, or what I've come to know of him, I don't think he would have the sophistication and literacy to be able to do something like that.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, because
in other words, he did use his harem of girls to offer sexual favors to anyone who Manson was trying to get something from that person. But as far as operating a sophisticated escort service, he would not know how to do that.
Okay, fascinating.
He just wouldn't have the sophistication to do that.
Okay, and he told you, too, he had nothing to do with Scientology.
No. He did delve in some of their principles, ideals, but he himself never practiced it. He would not have the literacy to be able to do that.
Fascinating. Okay.
So it would be inconceivable. It would be inconceivable to me that he would be able to practice that type of persuasion, that type of...
When your celebration of life is prepaid in advance, it becomes a gift from you to your family later, because no one should have to plan for a loss while they're experiencing one. Paying in advance protects your loved ones and gives you the peace of mind you deserve. Let us help you plan every detail with professionalism and compassion. We're your local Dignity Memorial provider. Find us at dignitymemorial.com.
Unexpected trouble? CashNet USA can take the stress out of borrowing emergency funds. Our fast, secure application process makes it easy to apply online 24/7. Plus, CashNet USA offers same-day funding if approved before 10:30 a.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. Additional terms may apply. Visit CashNetUSA.com or tap the banner to apply today.
Not really a religion. I don't even know what you would categorize it as, but Charlie Manson would not be in a capacity to be a Scientologist, a follower, or congregant.
Okay, very interesting. And what about John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas? Did that come up in your conversations?
Yes, not only John Phillips, but Elliot Katz, the one of the female lead singers. Yes, he fraternized with all of them, supplied them with drugs, LSD, and of course he also courted them in the hope that they would lead him to a music promoter so that he could record his music and have his music published. He did compose music, and he wasn't he was pretty good at it.
Yeah, Kurt Cobain. Someone just released an album. I think it was that guy Ed Rollins. It might have been some of his songs. What does he say about?
This is a fact.
Yeah,
I'll give you a very interesting fact.
Yeah,
the Beach Boys used one of his songs in an album that they had released in 1969. But they never paid him any royalties. But that particular album that the Beach Boys released in, I think it was the early part of 1969. I don't recall the name of the album, but they did use one of Manson's songs. Dennis Wilson promised him royalties, but Charlie never saw any money from that.
Now, and how did he react to that? Because I've also heard stories that Charlie Manson was used to collect drug debts. Anything like that come up?
Yes, that's not specifically, but I wouldn't doubt that. But as far as him trying to collect royalties from the Beach Boys for the song that they had used, for his song that they had used, the Beach Boys had after the release of the album, they had gone on tour in Europe, and Charlie needed some money in advance, so to speak. And when he visited the Beach Boys business manager, demanding some compensation, some advance toward the royalties that he had been promised, an argument ensued. And the Beach Boys business manager summoned the security people in the office building, and the two security people literally threw Charlie out a second floor window.
Really?
That was the end of him collecting any royalties. So all these different incidents, these comedic incidents that happened to him, again, as I mentioned earlier, are totally inconsistent with the notion and the way he was portrayed as this criminal mastermind.
Now, is this the first book that...
Mastermind doesn't... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, is this the first book that he's cooperated with?
This is the very first book that he's cooperated and endorsed in writing. He autographed the first page of the manuscript, and to dispel any non-believers that perhaps the signature was a fraud or a forgery, he placed his thumbprint beneath his signature.
Now,
so to authenticate the fact that he's the one who actually signed it.
Now, the I guess you call them the fans who constantly follow up and discuss this case online and stuff like that. How are they receiving this new book coming out? Are they happy that they're doing it, or they're already complaining? You know what I mean? 'Cause it's a tough crowd. The crowd that follows Manson. Yeah.
Yeah, 50% are all in favor, and 50% are not. He has as many followers as he has enemies.
Yeah, that's a tough.
The same applies to Henry Hill. Henry Hill had many fans, and he had just as many enemies.
Someone in the chat room says she'd recognize Charlie's thumbprint anywhere. I tell you, I'm really looking forward to having you back. We just talk about Charlie Manson, and also to get Nick Sacco on the show. We only got a couple of minutes. We got a couple of minutes left. What do you want to leave us with?
Let's see. What would I want to leave your listeners with? Well, I would encourage your listeners to purchase and read the Pierre Hotel affair. It's full of revelations, full of twists, and it also has a very touching love story attached to it. It's something that reads, I'm being told, that is, it reads like a film, very cinematic, the way it's written. I don't think it's boring. So, I mean, incidentally, the Pierre Hotel affair and my Lufthansa book both have been optioned for a full feature film for theaters. So at some point, we're all hoping, and I would like your listeners to look for it in the future, if and when a film is in fact developed and released for both of these books.
We're out of time. Daniel Simone, danielsimone.net. Thank you so much. People want to get a hold of you, they go to danielsimone.net. You can find the books on Amazon. The Lufthansa Heist, Behind the $6 Million Cash Haul That Shook the World, and the one that just came out the other day, May 9th, the Pierre Hotel Affair, how 8 gentlemen thieves plundered $28 million in the largest jewel heist in history. Daniel Simone, thank you so much, brother.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon. There you go, Daniel Simone. Great stuff, man. I really like this guy. And we'll have him back to talk about the whole Manson thing. I got so many questions about Manson. I don't know, because the thing about the Star Entertainment, I've heard other people confirm that in the Scott Michaels documentary, but I'll have to go back and take a look at that. And the Manson people who debate the Manson case are just such cutthroat folks. You get one little detail wrong and they jump down your throat. So I can't wait to see how this is received among the Manson community, I guess you might call it. Tonight, William Ramsey is doing a show after this about smiley face killers. It's an update. He has that guest back. I think his name is Jim Smith. So he's updating the smiley face killers. After that, we no longer carry the show The Dallas Action with Doug Campbell, but you can still catch Doug Campbell on his Spreaker channel. You just go on Spreaker, you type in The Dallas Action, and his show still plays on his channel now. But I won't be carrying it on my stuff. In its place tonight, we're going to have John Barber interviewing John Dean from Watergate. And John Barber is going to be, I think he does 2 shows a week. So we're going to have him on Saturday nights after William Ramsey. And I have a show from him in the can already with he's interviewing Cynthia McKinney and Wayne Madsen. He does really good work. John Barber, you might know. First of all, if you look at the what was that thing called? The pilot episode of The Gong Show. John Barber was the host of the pilot episode of The Gong Show. John Barber was the host of that TV show called Real People, the first reality television show. But he was also involved with the Jim Garrison investigation of JFK. And so he knows all these guys, Jim Mars and stuff like that. He's involved in a lot of stuff. He has a film that just came out. I don't have the name of it on the tip of my tongue. But a lot of good stuff coming out of John Barber. And I think he does 2 shows a week. So we'll be playing his show once we get up and running here on Saturday nights. And then Sunday nights, we're moving Nico House to Sunday nights. A lot of the stations that are hearing my voice right now don't carry anything I do on Sunday nights. So if they want it, they can have it. Contact me. Okay. We're going to have Nico House. I'm going to have a Green Party candidate. It's going to be on there. We're going to have, who's the other one? Alan Warren is going to be on Sunday nights on Awake Radio. Okay. At least. It's definitely going to be on Awake Radio. If you're listening on Awake Radio, it'll be on there. And another guy, too, who does like medical counseling and stuff like that, medical tips and stuff like that. A couple of interesting facts here about our friend here, Daniel Simone. The Lucchese family, when Anthony Corallo was the godfather of the Lucchese family, he was convicted in the commission trial, and I worked on the defense for Anthony Corallo in that case. Okay, so I worked for Anthony Corallo, and then when Anthony Corallo got convicted, they appointed this guy Anthony Casso, who, like I told you, was the kid in high school, was his dad, and it was kind of funny too because that kid who was the son of Anthony Casso. One of the teachers had a big crush on him. We had this teacher, this young, short-haired black-haired teacher, and had a crush on this kid, the son of Anthony Casso. And they used to flirt with each other right there in the class. They had big, giant smiles on their faces. And one day I had to go to the school. She was a young teacher, like 25 years old. One day I had to go to the school on a day when there were no classes, but the teacher was there in the building doing stuff, whatever to do. And that teacher was there, and she was wearing a pair of overalls with no shirt underneath it, no bra and no shirt. You could see like the side boob, and I was like in shock over this. And I knew she had a crush on that kid, so who knows what was going on with those two. But then, so Casso, Anthony Casso, when he was the head of the Lucchese family, he and Vincent Gigante from the Genovese family, they had plotted the murder of John Gotti and Gotti's driver, DeCicco. And so they put a bomb in DeCicco's car, and they blew up his car. They didn't kill Gotti because he wasn't in the car that day, but DeCicco got blown up. DeCicco's widow moved next door to me on Staten Island when I had my condo on Staten Island. She moved into the condo exactly. It was identical to mine. It was a 3-bedroom with a loft, catty corner to mine. So we lived on the same floor. Like our doors were inches away. And when I had my nightclub in Manhattan, the guys who used to shake down my nightclub were part of these guys who were part of the planning and murder of her husband. These guys would come into my building, to my apartment, and pass her in the hallways. The men who killed her husband were there, in the same, in the apartment right next door to her. I don't think she ever realized or knew. I guess maybe a little bit. I don't know. But they're just fascinating how things were just so different back in those days, back in Staten Island. A whole different world. And even, too, when you hear about this guy, Vincent the Chin Gigante, when he was a young man, before he went to prison, he had killed Albert Anastasia at a barber shop in the Sheraton Hotel. That's where I used to get my haircut. No, not my haircut. I used to get my beard trimmed there. But so, it's all these little topics with these organized crime folks is very close to my life here. Okay, coming up next is going to be William Ramsey. Don't forget the member section. You want to become a member, go to OppermanReport.com. If you want to get a special deal, I'll give you 13 months for $65. OppermanReport@gmail.com. Coming up next is William Ramsey.
If you've never played a game that's so much fun, it's impossible to put down, then you've never played Best Fiends. Best Fiends is the best Match 3 style mobile puzzle game out there. It's basically an action-packed adventure and a brain-boosting puzzle game all rolled into one. Most of the Match 3 games on the market are just the same old format with different colors, and maybe cookies instead of candies. But Best Fiends is different. You play through an actual storyline, complete with adorable, collectible characters called Fiends. As you get further along in the game, you'll watch your Fiends grow from wee baby versions of themselves into full-grown characters. The more you play, the more powerful and helpful your Fiends become. So if you're tired of crushing the same old candy, give Best Fiends a try. Download Best Fiends free today on the App Store or Google Play.
Play Best Fiends. Download free.
When your celebration of life is prepaid in advance, it becomes a gift from you to your family later, because no one should have to plan for a loss while they're experiencing one. Paying in advance protects your loved ones and gives you the peace of mind you deserve. Let us help you plan every detail with professionalism and compassion. We're your local Dignity Memorial provider. Find us at dignitymemorial.com.